I've spent a lot of years driving on empty and lonely roads with nothing but the sound of my truck's engine and the dark highway ahead. Some people might think it's boring or scary, but I've always liked the quiet. It's just me, the road, and my thoughts. But there's one night I'll never forget. Even now, it still sends chills down my spine. It was late, close to midnight. I was driving through a remote part of the highway in the middle of nowhere. The sky was pitch black, with no stars to light the way, just a heavy darkness. The road was empty, as it usually is at that time of night, and the only light came from my truck's headlights cutting through the night. There was something about the air that felt strange, like something wasn't right. I couldn't explain it, but it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. As I kept driving, I noticed something up ahead. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but as I got closer, I realized it was a woman standing by the side of the road, hitchhiking. She was wearing a light dress that seemed odd for such a cold night, and her hair was loose, blowing in the breeze. My first thought was to slow down. It's not every day you see a woman hitchhiking alone in the middle of nowhere, especially at midnight. Something felt off, but I didn't want to leave her stranded. What if she needed help? Just as I was about to pull over, I noticed something move in the bushes behind her. It was subtle, just a small rustle, but enough to make me freeze. I squinted into the darkness and saw them. Several men hiding in the shadows. I couldn't make out their faces, but I knew they were watching me. They were crouched low, ready to spring out at any moment. It hit me. This woman was bait. If I stopped, those men would ambush me. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I realized I had to act fast. Instead of slowing down, I pressed the gas pedal, making the truck roar as it sped up. The woman's expression changed. She went from calm to desperate, realizing I wasn't stopping. That's when the men burst out of the bushes, running straight for my truck. They were fast, much faster than I expected. The woman started running too, keeping up with them as they chased me like wild animals hunting prey. My heart pounded in my chest as I floored the gas pedal. The sound of their footsteps echoed behind me, growing louder. I didn't dare look in my mirrors. I just kept my eyes on the road, hoping my truck could outrun them. The road seemed endless, the darkness around me closing in. My adrenaline was pumping, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. But no matter how fast I drove, they didn't give up. I could hear them shouting now, though I couldn't make out the words. The fear in my chest turned into cold panic. These weren't just random attackers. They were determined to catch me. Then, just as I thought they would reach my truck, the road curved sharply. It was the kind of turn that could throw you off the road if you weren't careful. I took it at full speed, feeling the truck tilt dangerously as I held on tight. As I came around the bend, I glanced in the mirror. The road behind me was empty. They were gone. I didn't slow down. I kept driving, putting as much distance between me and that place as possible. The fear didn't leave me, though. It stayed with me, a cold chill that wouldn't go away, even when I reached the next town. I parked at a gas station, my heart still racing and my hands still shaking. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in my truck, staring out into the darkness, waiting for morning. Since that night, I've driven that stretch of highway many times, but I've never seen the woman or those men again. Still, every time I pass that spot, I get the same cold shiver down my spine, a reminder of how close I came to something terrible. And every time, I make sure to keep my foot on the gas and my eyes sharp, because out there in the darkness, you never know what's waiting for you. I was on a late-night delivery, driving through mostly empty roads. At this time of night, the only people out there were other delivery drivers like me. Everything was going smoothly, nothing unusual for the first few hours. Around 1 a.m., I stopped at a truck station to fill up and use the restroom. The next part of the trip was going to take me through a long stretch of dense forest with very few places to stop, if any. About an hour after I got back on the road, I saw something up ahead. As I drove past, I realized it was a person standing on the side of the road. What was strange was that there was nothing around. No cars, no buildings, just thick, dark forest. Seeing someone out here, in the middle of nowhere, didn't make any sense. The weird thing was, the person didn't wave or try to get my attention. They just stood there. I couldn't stop thinking about it as I kept driving. A mile later, I saw another person standing by the road. This time, it was a woman in ripped jeans and a red sweatshirt. As I passed by, we made eye contact. She didn't smile, didn't frown, just stared at me with a blank, empty face. It sent chills down my spine. I looked in the mirror after passing her and saw her head turning to watch my truck until the darkness swallowed her up. Just when I turned my focus back on the road, my heart nearly stopped. I slammed on the brakes. There was a body lying flat in the middle of the road. I couldn't tell if they were alive or not. They weren't moving, but the whole thing didn't feel right. There were no signs of an accident, no wreckage, no skid marks, nothing. I sat there, frozen. Part of me wanted to check if they were okay, but something deep inside told me not to get out of the truck. The feeling in my gut kept getting worse. Seeing 3 people out here in such a short distance felt like too much of a coincidence. I looked around at the forest, trying to shake the creepy feeling that something wasn't right. After a minute of sitting there, I decided to drive around the body instead of stopping. My heart was pounding, and as I slowly pulled away, I glanced in the mirror one more time. The body wasn't lying down anymore. They were standing up, watching me drive away. The rest of the drive, I kept my eyes peeled, scared out of my mind. I didn't see any more people, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it had been some kind of setup. Maybe they were trying to get me to stop, but clearly, whoever was lying in the road wasn't dead or injured. I don't know what they would have done if I had gotten out of the truck, but I didn't want to find out. Even thinking about that night now still gives me the creeps. I was driving from Des Moines, Iowa to Minneapolis, Minnesota, a trip I make a couple of times a month. I love this route. It's mostly flat farmland, easy to drive, and there's hardly any traffic. I've done it so many times that I have a routine. There's this big truck stop between 2 small towns in South Dakota where I always stop to rest for the night. It's usually quiet, with only 2 or 3 other trucks parked there. The first day of the drive went smoothly, and I got to the truck stop around 1 a.m., but something was immediately off. The whole place was boarded up. The gas pumps were ripped out of the ground, and the lights were off. It was completely abandoned. I wasn't shocked, but it threw off my usual routine. I had 2 choices: drive another hour or try to sleep in the dark, empty lot. Normally, I would have just stayed and slept, but that night, I didn't even consider it. I pulled back onto the highway, but after 15 minutes, I was struggling to keep my eyes open. I pulled over on the gravel shoulder, trying to wake myself up, but I was exhausted. I knew it wasn't safe to keep driving, so I figured I'd just sleep there on the side of the road. Other truckers do it all the time, so I thought I'd be fine. I turned off the engine, locked the doors, and put up the window covers. But for some reason, I couldn't fall asleep. I just lay there for about 20 minutes wide awake. Then I heard something, a small squeak, like an old car braking, coming from behind my trailer. I sat up and listened. Faintly, I heard a car engine humming. I thought maybe it was a cop checking on me, but when I took down the window shade and looked in the side mirror, I realized it wasn't a police car. I didn't have much time to think before I heard someone shout, "Hey!" My heart jumped. I knew I had to leave. I turned the truck on, but these big rigs take time to start up. As soon as the engine roared to life, I heard footsteps sprinting toward me. Someone started pulling on the passenger door handle, hard. I saw him, an older guy, maybe in his 40s, with a long, bushy beard and a dark hoodie. He banged on the window, trying to get in. I hit the gas, pulling onto the highway, but he didn't let go. He hung onto the door, staring right at me through the glass. Just as I started to pick up speed, he smashed the window. I glanced over at the shattered glass, but when I looked back, he was gone. In my mirror, I saw him rolling on the road, either because he jumped off or lost his grip. I kept driving, my heart pounding until he and his car were completely out of sight. I called the cops, but they were so far away it took them 35 minutes to get there. By then, the only thing left were shards of glass scattered on the road. If that guy had broken the window a few seconds earlier, he could have reached in and opened the door. I don't even want to think about what could have happened next. The lesson I learned that night: trust your gut. If something feels wrong, leave immediately. Every second can make a huge difference between getting away and something much worse.